If you're looking for stories that show how family secrets can destroy everything in seconds, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell because what happened next will leave you speechless. My name is Sarah, I'm 28 years old, and I live in Denver, Colorado. I work as a marketing coordinator for a tech startup downtown, and for most of my life, I thought I had the perfect American family. You know the kind, the family that looks flawless from the outside, the one your neighbors envy and your friends wish they had. My father, Robert, is a respected attorney at one of the city's most prestigious law firms, Manning & Associates. He's the kind of man who commands respect when he walks into a room with his perfectly pressed suits and his confident stride. He drives a black BMW, plays golf every Saturday morning at the Cherry Hills Country Club, and has never missed a day of work in 23 years. My mother, Linda, teaches third grade at Steele Elementary and volunteers at our local Presbyterian church every Sunday. She's the woman who bakes cookies for school fundraisers, organizes neighborhood block parties, and always remembers everyone's birthdays. We live in a beautiful 2-story colonial house in Cherry Creek, one of Denver's most affluent neighborhoods. The house has everything you'd expect from a successful American family: a manicured front lawn, a white picket fence, a 3-car garage, and a golden retriever named Max who greets everyone with enthusiastic tail wags. The interior is straight out of a home magazine. Hardwood floors throughout, a gourmet kitchen with granite countertops, and a formal dining room where we hosted dinner parties for Dad's colleagues. Growing up, I was the poster child for privilege. I attended Denver Academy, a private school where tuition cost more than most people's annual salary. I played tennis at the country club, took piano lessons from an instructor who had studied at Juilliard, and spent summers at expensive camps in Aspen. My parents drove me to every soccer game, attended every school play, and displayed my honor roll certificates on the refrigerator like trophies. From the outside, we were the Manning family, successful, respected, and seemingly perfect. But perfect families, as I learned the hard way, are often just carefully constructed lies. It was Thanksgiving 2023, and our dining room was filled with the warm scent of roasted turkey and pumpkin pie. Mom had been cooking since 5 a.m., following the same recipes she'd used for the past decade. The autumn sun streamed through our bay windows, casting golden light across the mahogany table that had been in our family for 3 generations. A wedding gift from my great-grandmother that Dad never let us forget cost more than most people's cars. The table was set with Mom's finest china, the Waterford crystal glasses that only came out for special occasions, and the silver cutlery that she polished by hand every holiday. Fall decorations adorned the mantelpiece: pumpkins, gourds, and maple leaves arranged with the precision of a museum display. Everything had to be perfect for the Manning family Thanksgiving, just like every year. My Aunt Margaret had driven up from Colorado Springs with her twin daughters, Emma and Grace, both college sophomores at UC Boulder. Margaret is Mom's younger sister, and she's always been the more free-spirited one. She owns a small art gallery and wears flowing scarves that Dad secretly disapproves of. Emma is studying pre-med with a 4.0 GPA, which Dad never fails to mention when introducing her to people. Grace is majoring in international relations and speaks 3 languages fluently, another achievement Dad loves to brag about, often followed by pointed looks in my direction. My paternal grandparents, Harold and Ruth, had flown in from Phoenix, their first visit since Dad's promotion to senior partner 6 months earlier. Grandpa Harold is a retired judge, a man who still wears suits to family dinners and expects everyone to stand when he enters a room. Grandma Ruth taught piano for 40 years and has never said a word above a whisper in my presence. They're the kind of people who measure success in titles, bank accounts, and social standing. I had been dreading this dinner for weeks, but not for the reasons you might think. 3 months earlier, I had made a decision that I knew would disappoint my father. I had quit my previous job at Mitchell & Associates, a prestigious accounting firm where Dad's law school roommate Bill was a senior partner. It was supposed to be my in to Denver's professional elite, a stepping stone to partner status and country club memberships. The salary was excellent, the benefits were top tier, and my future was mapped out in neat, predictable increments. But I was miserable. Every morning, I'd sit in my beige cubicle, staring at spreadsheets that felt like prison bars, counting down the hours until I could escape. The work was mind-numbing, the office politics were suffocating, and I felt like I was slowly disappearing into corporate mediocrity. So I made a choice that my father considered unthinkable. I quit to pursue my passion for digital marketing. The tech startup where I now work, Altitude Digital, operates out of a converted warehouse in the River North Arts District. It's a world away from the sterile corporate environment I'd left behind. The office has exposed brick walls, beanbag chairs, and a coffee bar where the CEO makes lattes for anyone who wants one. We work on campaigns for innovative companies, sustainable fashion brands, indie music labels, local restaurants trying to compete with chains. The pay cut was significant, but for the first time in years, I actually enjoyed going to work. But Dad saw it differently. To him, I had thrown away a stable career for what he called internet nonsense. He'd spent months making passive-aggressive comments about my choice, questioning my judgment in front of family friends, and reminding me that I was wasting my potential on a daily basis. As we gathered around the table, Mom brought out her famous green bean casserole, the one with the crispy onions on top that she makes from scratch. She'd been perfecting this recipe for 15 years, and it was a source of genuine pride for her. Grandma Ruth complimented the cranberry sauce, noting the perfect balance of sweet and tart, while Aunt Margaret raved about the perfectly golden turkey that Dad had carved with ceremonial precision. The conversation flowed easily at first, following the familiar rhythms of Manning family gatherings. Emma talked about her pre-med studies at Boulder, describing her organic chemistry class with the enthusiasm only a future doctor could muster. She wanted to specialize in pediatrics, she explained, because she loved working with children. Dad beamed with pride as she spoke, nodding approvingly at every detail. Grace shared stories from her semester abroad in Italy, her eyes lighting up as she described the cobblestone streets of Florence and the art museums of Rome. She'd learned to make authentic pasta from an elderly woman in Tuscany, she told us, and was planning to minor in Italian language studies. Dad listened intently, occasionally interjecting with questions that showed he'd been following her progress closely through her weekly emails. Grandpa Harold regaled us with tales from his recent fishing trip to Montana, complete with dramatic reenactments of the one that got away. He'd caught 3 rainbow trout, he claimed, each one bigger than the last, though we'd heard this story grow more elaborate with each telling. Grandma Ruth smiled indulgently at her husband's fish tales, occasionally adding gentle corrections to keep his stories anchored in reality. The dining room felt warm and comfortable, filled with the kind of easy laughter that comes from years of shared traditions. This was the Manning family at its best, successful, accomplished, gathered around our ancestral table to celebrate another year of blessings. It was the scene Dad had painted for years when he talked about our family values, our strong foundations, our commitment to each other. I should have felt grateful to be part of this perfect picture. Instead, all I could think about was the conversation Dad and I had had the week before, when he'd spent 20 minutes explaining why my career choice was a slap in the face to everything we've taught you. Then Dad raised his wine glass, a 2018 Cabernet Sauvignon from his private collection. "I'd like to make a toast," he said, his voice carrying that authoritative tone he used in courtrooms and boardroom meetings. Everyone quieted down immediately, expecting one of his traditional gratitude speeches about family and blessings. Dad loved making toasts. It was his moment to hold court, to remind everyone of his position as the family patriarch. Instead, his eyes found mine across the table, and I felt my stomach drop. "To making smart choices in life," he began, swirling the wine in his glass like he was savoring the moment, "and to learning from the mistakes of others." His gaze never left my face, and I could see the disapproval burning behind his eyes. Some people understand the value of stability and reputation. They recognize that success comes from making practical decisions, from building on the foundations their families have provided. He paused dramatically, the way he did when he was about to deliver a crushing blow in court. "Others," he continued, his voice taking on a disappointed edge, "well, others choose to be disappointments to their families." The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel everyone's eyes shifting between Dad and me, the festive atmosphere evaporating like steam from Mom's gravy boat. The grandfather clock in the hallway seemed to tick louder, each second stretching into eternity. Mom's fork stopped halfway to her mouth, her face going pale as she realized what was happening. Aunt Margaret shifted uncomfortably in her chair, shooting a concerned glance toward her daughters. Emma and Grace looked confused, unsure whether they should laugh or remain silent. Grandpa Harold set down his wine glass with deliberate care, his expression darkening. Grandma Ruth's eyes darted between her son and me, clearly wishing she were anywhere else. "Robert," Mom whispered, her voice barely audible above the sudden tension. "This isn't the time." "No, Linda, this is exactly the time," Dad interrupted, setting his wine glass down with a sharp clink that echoed through the room. "Our family is gathered here, celebrating everything we've worked for, everything we've built. And I think it's important that everyone understands the choices that strengthen families and the ones that tear them down." My cheeks burned with embarrassment and anger. I could feel the heat creeping up my neck, my hands starting to shake with a combination of humiliation and rage. This was supposed to be Thanksgiving dinner, not a public trial with me as the defendant. "Sarah here," Dad continued, gesturing toward me like I was Exhibit A in a criminal case, "decided to throw away a perfectly good career at Mitchell & Associates, a firm where she could have made partner in 10 years, where she had security, benefits, and a future, to play around with computers and social media." The way he said, "computers and social media," made it sound like I'd decided to become a street performer or sell trinkets at a flea market. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but he wasn't finished. "Do you know how embarrassing it is?" he asked the table, though his eyes remained fixed on me. "When Bill Mitchell calls me to ask why my daughter quit with no notice? When my colleagues at the firm ask me what Sarah is doing now, and I have to tell them she's working for some startup company that will probably fail within 2 years? My cheeks burned with embarrassment and anger. This wasn't just criticism. It was a public execution disguised as a family dinner. "Dad, my job isn't playing around. I'm helping businesses grow their online presence. I'm creating marketing strategies that actually work, and I'm learning skills that—" "You're wasting your potential," he cut me off, his voice rising to fill the entire dining room. "Do you understand what you've done? The Mitchell firm has a waiting list of candidates who would kill for the position you abandoned. You had connections, Sarah. You had a future mapped out. And you threw it all away for what? To make Instagram posts for companies that sell overpriced coffee?" I felt tears stinging my eyes, but something else was building inside me. A rage I'd been suppressing for months. All the sideways comments at family gatherings, all the times he'd undermined my confidence, all the ways he'd made me feel small and worthless for daring to choose my own path instead of following his blueprint for success. Grandpa Harold cleared his throat uncomfortably, his judicial instincts kicking in. "Robert, perhaps we should discuss this privately after dinner." "No, Dad. Everyone should hear this," my father continued, his face flushing red with what I was beginning to realize was genuine anger. "Sarah has become a disgrace to this family. We raised her better than this, gave her every opportunity, paid for the best education money could buy, opened doors that most people could never even dream of walking through. And this is how she repays us." The word disgrace hit me like a physical blow. I had expected disappointment, maybe even anger. But disgrace? That was the word he used to describe criminals, not his own daughter who had simply chosen a different career path. But then I remembered something. Something that had been eating at me for weeks, something that gave me power in this moment when I felt completely powerless. I had something he didn't know I knew. 2 weeks earlier, I had been using Dad's laptop to print some documents for a freelance project I was working on. His computer was faster than mine, and he'd always told me to use it whenever I needed to. I was looking for the printer folder when I accidentally clicked on the wrong directory, a folder labeled Personal Private. What I found there changed everything I thought I knew about my perfect father, my moral authority figure, the man who had just called me a disgrace in front of our entire family. There were email chains with someone named Jessica Martinez, hotel confirmations for the Marriott downtown, credit card receipts for expensive dinners at restaurants Dad had never taken Mom to, text message screenshots that made my stomach turn, calendar appointments blocked out as client meetings that were obviously something else entirely. My father, the man who lectured me about integrity, about family values, about being a good person, had been having an affair for over 2 years. Now, sitting at our family table while he publicly humiliated me, I made a decision that would change all of our lives forever. "You want to talk about disgrace, Dad?" I said, my voice surprisingly steady, despite my trembling hands. The words seemed to come from somewhere deep inside me, a place I'd never accessed before. "Let's talk about disgrace." Mom's eyes widened in warning. She knew that tone. It was the same one I'd used as a child when I was about to get in serious trouble for speaking my mind. But I was 28 years old now, and I was done being treated like a disappointment by a man who was living a lie. "Sarah, don't," she whispered, but there was something in her voice that made me think she already suspected what I was about to say. But I was beyond caring about maintaining our family's perfect facade. "Tell me, Dad," I continued, looking directly into his eyes. "How disgraceful is it to have an affair with your paralegal for the past 2 years?" The words hung in the air like a bomb that had just detonated. I watched the color drain from Dad's face so quickly I thought he might faint right there at the head of our family table. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly, like a fish gasping for air on dry land. Grandma Ruth gasped audibly, her hand flying to her chest. Aunt Margaret's wine glass slipped from her fingers, red wine spreading across Mom's pristine white tablecloth like blood seeping through bandages. Emma and Grace sat frozen, their mouths hanging open in shock, their perfect family dinner suddenly transformed into something out of a soap opera. But Mom's reaction was the worst. She didn't gasp or cry out or demand explanations. She just sat there, staring at Dad with a look of complete devastation, as if the last 29 years of her life had just crumbled into dust. I could see the exact moment when everything clicked into place for her. All the late nights at the office, all the business trips that seemed to happen more and more frequently, all the times she'd felt like something was wrong but had convinced herself she was being paranoid. "Sarah, what are you—" Dad started, but his voice cracked like a teenager's, all his courtroom authority evaporating in an instant. "Jessica Martinez," I continued, my voice gaining strength with each word. I felt like I was prosecuting a case, and the evidence was overwhelming. 26 years old, works on the 14th floor of your building. Graduated from DU with a paralegal certificate. You've been meeting her at the Marriott downtown every Tuesday and Thursday after work for the past 2 years. The silence in the room was deafening. I could hear the heating system clicking on, the sound of cars passing by outside, Max scratching at the back door to be let in. Normal sounds of life continuing while our family imploded. "You bought her a diamond necklace for her birthday last month," I pressed on, feeling a strange sense of power that I'd never experienced before. "A necklace from Tiffany & Co. that cost $3,000, the same one you told Mom you bought for your secretary Mrs. Henderson's retirement gift." I watched as Mom's face went through a series of emotions, confusion, recognition, and then a kind of cold fury I'd never seen from her before. "The necklace I helped you pick out," Mom said quietly. "The one you said was for Martha's 40 years of service." Dad looked like he was about to be sick. The silence stretched on forever, broken only by the sound of Grandma Ruth's quiet sobbing. I could hear the grandfather clock in the hallway ticking, the sound seeming unnaturally loud in our devastated dining room. The turkey was getting cold, the carefully prepared sides were sitting untouched, and our perfect Thanksgiving was turning into a nightmare that none of us would ever forget. Dad's mouth opened and closed, like a fish gasping for air. "How did you—" "Your laptop, Dad," I said, surprised by how calm I sounded. 2 weeks ago, when I was printing those marketing materials for my internet nonsense job. You left your email open, and your hotel confirmations were right there in your inbox, along with some very interesting text messages that automatically sync to your computer. I had memorized some of those messages, and they were seared into my brain. Messages about missing her, about when they could see each other next, about how complicated everything was becoming. Messages that made me feel sick to my stomach because they were so different from the way Dad talked to Mom, cold, distant, preoccupied with work and social obligations. "The 4 Seasons last month when you told Mom you were at the legal conference in Vail," I continued, each revelation hitting the table like another nail in his coffin. "The weekend in Aspen when you said you were visiting Grandpa Harold, who, by the way, was actually in Florida visiting Aunt Susan that weekend." Grandpa Harold's face went red, whether from anger or embarrassment, I couldn't tell. "Robert, Is this true? Dad looked around the table at all of us. His parents, his sister-in-law, his nieces, his wife, his daughter, all staring at him with a mixture of shock, disappointment, and disgust. For the first time in my life, my father looked small and pathetic instead of commanding and authoritative. He started, then stopped. Linda, I can explain. Is it true? Mom's voice was stronger now, carrying a steel I'd never heard before. She wasn't the soft-spoken elementary school teacher anymore. She was a woman who had just discovered that her entire life had been built on lies. Dad looked down at his plate, at the turkey he'd carved with such ceremony just minutes earlier. When he looked up, his eyes were filled with tears, but I felt no sympathy for him. Not after what he'd just put me through. Not after the years of making me feel inadequate while he was living such a hypocritical life. Yes, he whispered. It's true. The admission hung in the air like a death sentence. Grandma Ruth's quiet sobs turned into audible crying. Grandpa Harold stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor with a harsh sound that made everyone jump. I think we should go back to the hotel, he said quietly, his voice filled with more disappointment than I'd ever heard from him. In 40 years of being a judge, he'd probably seen every kind of human failing, but this was his own son destroying his own family. Harold, wait! Dad reached out toward his father, but Grandpa stepped away. Don't, Grandpa said, his voice shaking. Just don't. Aunt Margaret was already gathering her purse, motioning for Emma and Grace to follow her. Her face was pale, and I could see her hands shaking as she tried to maintain some composure in front of her daughters. Girls, get your coats. We're leaving. But Aunt Linda's dessert, Grace started, still trying to process what had just happened. She looked confused and scared, like a child who had just witnessed something she wasn't supposed to see. Now, Margaret said firmly, her voice brooking no argument. We're going back to the hotel. Emma stood up slowly, her pre-med student mind probably trying to make sense of the family dynamics that had just exploded in front of her. Mom, should we? No, Margaret said, already heading toward the front door. We should go. As our family members filed out of the dining room, making awkward excuses and avoiding eye contact, the house that had felt warm and full of laughter just minutes earlier suddenly felt cold and empty. I could hear car doors slamming outside, engines starting, tires crunching on the gravel driveway as our extended family fled from the wreckage of our Thanksgiving dinner. Dad tried one last time to regain control of the situation, his lawyer instincts kicking in even as his personal life crumbled around him. Everyone just calm down, he said, standing up and trying to project the authority that had served him so well in courtrooms. We can work through this as a family. These things happen, and we can get past this if we all just— We? I interrupted, standing up too, my chair falling backward with a crash. We can work through this? You call me a disgrace in front of our entire family for choosing my own career path. But we're supposed to work through the fact that you've been cheating on Mom for 2 years? Sarah, you had no right to— Dad started, but I cut him off. I had no right? My voice was rising now, all the anger and hurt and humiliation of the past hour pouring out of me. You humiliated me in front of everyone, made me feel like garbage for following my dreams, called me a disappointment and a disgrace. But I have no right to defend myself when you're the one living a lie? Mom was still sitting at the table, staring at her untouched plate. I could see her hands shaking as she tried to process what had just happened, tried to reconcile the man she'd married with the stranger who had just been exposed. Linda, please, Dad approached her, his voice taking on a pleading tone I'd never heard before. We can talk about this. We can get counseling. This doesn't have to destroy our marriage. But when he reached out to touch her shoulder, she flinched away from him like he was a stranger. Don't touch me, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Just don't. The house felt eerily quiet after everyone left. The three of us stood in our destroyed dining room, surrounded by half-eaten food and abandoned wine glasses, the remains of what should have been a perfect family Thanksgiving. The fall decorations that Mom had arranged so carefully now looked garish and out of place, like party decorations at a funeral. Dad tried to speak several more times, offering explanations and excuses that sounded hollow in the destroyed atmosphere of our dining room. He talked about how the affair just happened, how he never meant for it to go this far, how Jessica was just someone to talk to when work got stressful. Each word sounded more pathetic than the last, and I could see Mom becoming more distant with every excuse. "It started innocently," he said, pacing back and forth behind his chair. "She was working late on some cases. I was there finishing up briefs. We would just talk. She's young, she's interested in the law. She looked up to me." Mom let out a bitter laugh that I'd never heard from her before. "She looked up to you. How convenient." "Linda, it's not what you think." "What I think," Mom said, finally looking up at him, "is that you're a liar. What I think is that while I was home grading papers and taking care of our daughter and making sure your shirts were pressed and your favorite meals were ready, you were playing house with a woman who's younger than Sarah." The comparison hit me like a slap. Jessica Martinez was only 2 years younger than me. While Dad was lecturing me about my life choices, he was having an affair with someone who could have been my college classmate. "How long has this been going on, really?" Mom asked, her voice getting stronger. "Not the physical affair. I mean the lies, the late nights that weren't really work, the business trips that weren't really business, the times you came home and showered immediately, the new cologne, the way you stopped touching me like you used to." I watched my father crumble as Mom laid out a pattern of deception that apparently went back much further than the email evidence I'd found. She had been noticing things, filing away inconsistencies, living with a growing sense that something was wrong, but not trusting her own instincts. "I kept telling myself I was being paranoid," Mom continued. "When you started working late every Tuesday and Thursday, when you suddenly needed to attend more weekend conferences, when you became obsessed with going to the gym and buying new clothes, I thought maybe you were having a midlife crisis. Maybe you just needed space. I never thought." She trailed off, shaking her head. Finally, she stood up and walked to the coat closet in our foyer, her movements deliberate and calm, in a way that was somehow more frightening than if she had been screaming and throwing things. "Where are you going?" Dad asked, following her. "To my sister's house," Mom replied, without looking at him. She was pulling on her coat with mechanical precision, like she was getting ready for work on any ordinary day. "Don't follow me. Don't call me. Don't send flowers or letters or any of the things you probably did for her when you wanted to apologize for something. Linda, we need to talk about this." "We needed to talk about this 2 years ago," Mom said, turning to face him one last time. "Before you decided that our 29-year marriage wasn't enough for you. Before you decided that I wasn't enough for you." She looked at me then, and I saw something in her eyes that I'd never seen before. A kind of fierce strength that had been buried under years of being the perfect attorney's wife. "Sarah," she said, "I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. I'm proud of you for following your dreams, even when it was hard. And I'm sorry that it took this for me to say it." Then she was gone, leaving Dad and me alone in the house for the first time since that terrible dinner began. After Mom left, the silence stretched between us like a chasm. Dad sat heavily in his armchair, the leather recliner where he usually read legal briefs and watched the evening news. But tonight, he looked older than I'd ever seen him, deflated like a balloon with all the air let out. "You've destroyed our family," he said quietly, not looking at me. "No, Dad," I replied, grabbing my jacket from the back of my chair. "You did that all by yourself. I just refused to let you destroy me too." I started walking toward the front door, but his voice stopped me. "Where are you going?" "Home," I said. "To my apartment. To my life. To the job you think is so disgraceful." "Sarah, wait." He stood up, and for a moment, he looked like the father I remembered from childhood, vulnerable, uncertain, human. "I know you're angry, but we're still family. We can get through this." I turned around to look at him one last time. Family doesn't humiliate each other in public. Family doesn't call each other a disgrace for making different choices. And family definitely doesn't lie and cheat and then expect everyone else to pretend it never happened. "I never meant for any of this to happen," he said, and I could hear genuine regret in his voice. "But it did happen, Dad. All of it. The affair, the lies, the way you treated me tonight. And now we all have to live with the consequences. That was 3 months ago, and our family has never been the same." Mom filed for divorce 2 weeks later. She's living with Aunt Carol now, and she seems lighter somehow, like a weight has been lifted from her shoulders. She started taking pottery classes and joined a book club. She tells me she's rediscovering who she is outside of being Robert Manning's wife. Dad moved into a downtown apartment. The firm asked him to take a leave of absence after the story inevitably leaked. Apparently, office affairs don't look good for the company's reputation. The irony wasn't lost on me. As for me, I got promoted to senior marketing manager at my startup. We just landed our biggest client yet, and I'm happier in my career than I've ever been. I bought a small condo in the Highlands neighborhood with exposed brick walls and huge windows. Max the golden retriever lives with me now. Dad couldn't take care of him in his new apartment. People ask me if I regret what I did that Thanksgiving, if I wish I had kept Dad's secret and preserved our family. The answer is no. That dinner taught me something valuable. Sometimes the people who judge us the harshest are the ones living the biggest lies. Sometimes standing up for yourself means watching everything you thought you knew fall apart. And sometimes that's exactly what needs to happen. My relationship with Dad is complicated now. We've had a few awkward coffee meetings where he's tried to apologize, to explain how the affair just happened. But he's never apologized for calling me a disgrace. He's never acknowledged that his criticism of my choices was unfair, especially coming from someone living such a hypocritical life. Maybe someday we'll find our way back to some kind of relationship. Maybe not. But I'm okay with that uncertainty now. I learned that perfect families are often just performances, and I'd rather have an imperfect, honest life than a beautiful lie. Mom and I have grown closer than ever. She comes to my place every Sunday, and we cook dinner together while Max lies at our feet. She tells me stories about her childhood, her dreams before she became Mrs. Manning, the pottery pieces she's learning to make. "I'm proud of you," she told me last week as we shared homemade pasta in my little kitchen. "Not just for standing up for yourself, but for having the courage to follow your own path, even though it destroyed Thanksgiving dinner?" I asked. She laughed, a sound I hadn't heard nearly enough growing up. "Honey, that dinner was already ruined. You just refused to pretend it wasn't." If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear that standing up for yourself is always worth it, even when it's hard. And don't forget to subscribe because we share real stories about real people navigating life's most challenging moments. Your story could be next.